Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're jumping right into a pretty incredible journey. We're tracing the 244-year evolution of the United States Army Non-Commissioned Officer Corps. Now look, we always hear the NCO called the backbone of the Army, right? But how exactly did that happen? Like, how did we get from those freezing, totally chaotic camps of the American Revolution all the way to the highly educated, globally deployed professionals we see today? Well, it's honestly an epic story of adaptation. Let's unpack exactly how it went down.
I think the 11th Sergeant Major of the Army, Robert E. Hall, actually summarized this perfectly. He said, and I quote, "History shows that when we moved into the 20th century, the Army decided it needed a different kind of NCO, motivated, dedicated, and smart, and a corps that can deal with ever-changing environments." End quote. That basically nails our whole thesis today. You see, the history of the NCO, it isn't just a boring timeline of dates. It's the story of an institution that is constantly, almost obsessively, evolving to solve whatever complex, unprecedented problems the world throws its way.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for this explainer. We're breaking this down into 6 distinct eras. First, the origins of the American NCO. Then, the frontier and Civil War. Moving into Industrial War and WWI, followed by WWI and technical ranks, then the emergence of educated professionals, and finally, the modern NCO Corps.
All right, starting right at the beginning. Chapter 1, Origins of the American NCO, Building the Foundation. So back when the Continental Army was first formed in 1775, they basically just borrowed the idea of the sergeant from the British. But man, they severely lack standardization. The early American Army was constantly short on supplies. The pay was totally erratic, and frankly, they really struggled with desertion and just a general lack of uniform discipline. To fix this massive headache, Prussian Baron Friedrich von Steuben shows up at the freezing camps of Valley Forge in 1778, and he pretty much changes everything. Von Steuben is actually often called the father of the NCO Corps because he wrote what became known as the Blue Book. This manual, finally, officially, standardized the hands-on training duties of the NCO. Literally for the first time, an NCO wasn't just some officer's assistant. No, they were specifically charged with teaching the other guys how to drill and actually operate as a unified formation.
Von Steuben actually used a really brilliant historical comparison to explain these new dynamics. He envisioned that the officer should be the father of the company, while the sergeants, well, they should act as the mothers. It's kind of a fascinating way to look at it, right? While the officers were zoomed out, focusing on broader command, the NCOs were tasked with the direct, daily, totally meticulous care, discipline, and enforcement of the troops. They were the ones on the ground ensuring the soldiers were trained, clean, and truly ready to go.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, the Frontier and Civil War, Isolation and Small Unit Leadership.
As the 19th century kicked off, the Army's role shifted drastically. We went from fighting a major European power on the East Coast to exploring and safeguarding the absolutely vast, isolated American West. During the War of 1812, Winfield Scott organized these camps of instruction that heavily relied on NCOs. This actually culminated in his 1815 drill regulations, which eventually replaced von Steuben's Blue Book. But the real crucible here, that was the frontier. By 1885, the Army was spread super thin across 255 lonely Western outposts. Think about that geographic isolation. You had these highly mobile cavalry patrols operating for weeks at a time, and officers obviously couldn't be everywhere at once. So out of pure necessity, this wild environment forced NCOs to become highly independent, tactical small unit leaders.
Moving on to Chapter 3, Industrial War and WWI, The Quest for Professionalism.
So, hitting the 20th century, rapid industrialization had this massive direct cause and effect on the ranks. Suddenly, the Army desperately needed mechanics, communicators, and medical specialists. But there was a huge problem. The civilian sector needed all those exact same skills, and they offered way better pay. So naturally, these highly skilled NCOs were leaving in droves. To stop the bleeding, Congress stepped in and passed the Pay Bill of 1908, bumping NCO pay to finally match civilian wages. Shortly after that, the 1912 revisions to the Articles of War gave NCOs specific, codified legal authority. It actually made it a punishable offense to disobey an NCO. The Army was waking up to the fact that they absolutely had to pay and empower these leaders if they wanted to keep them around.
But then, of course, came World War I. The United States rolled out mass conscription, bringing nearly 3 million draftees into the ranks practically overnight. I mean, this sudden, massive influx completely broke the old system where local officers would just hand-pick their NCOs. They were rapidly promoting people just to fill empty slots, and as you'd guess, quality just plummeted. Recognizing this massive crisis, General John Pershing called for formal NCO schools. And yeah, while the actual implementation during the war was pretty messy, it was this crucial first realization that the Army desperately, urgently needed standardized education for its non-commissioned officers.
Let's look at Chapter 4, WWI and Technical Ranks. Mechanization meets leadership.
Now, the incredible scale of mass mobilization during World War II, which, by the way, peaked at over 8 million troops, collided head-on with the unprecedented demands of mechanized, high-tech combat. And this jarring leap in warfare happened incredibly fast. It's a stark contrast when you think about it. On one side, you still had the old cavalry-focused army, with guys like Sergeant John Hill on a jumping horse in 1941. And right alongside that, you have Corporal John Robbins operating this complex WW2 radio equipment. The Army was demanding an entirely new level of technical sophistication from its enlisted ranks, and they needed it basically overnight.
To handle these crazy dual demands of brand new technology and actual combat leadership, the Army tried something new. They created this technical rank system. The idea was to separate the technical experts, like a technician 5th grade, or T5, who got the intermediate pay but strictly limited command authority, from the traditional combat NCOs, who were focused purely on tactical troop leadership. But honestly, it was confusing. It was clunky and unwieldy, and it just didn't work very well in practice. So they actually ended up scrapping the whole thing in 1949, pivoting toward the grade structure we recognize today.
All right, Chapter 5, Educated Professionals Emerge, the Post-War Renaissance.
The looming Cold War environment really demanded a standing, ready force at all times. The Army quickly realized the only way to achieve that was through formalized education. You just couldn't separate the technical expert from the leader anymore. They had to be one and the same. This huge educational lock-in actually started right after World War II, around 1945, with the makeshift Lido Training Center over in occupied Italy. Then, by 1949, under Brigadier General Bruce C. Clark, the Constabulary NCO Academy opened up in Munich. This was huge. It was the very first academy specifically devoted to creating professional NCOs, and that laid the groundwork step by step for what would eventually snowball into the massive Army-wide Non-Commissioned Officer Education System, or NCOs.
But you know what the ultimate catalyst was for locking this education system into place permanently? It was the Vietnam War. The structural crises of Vietnam, specifically that one-year rotation policy, totally fractured unit cohesion. NCOs simply didn't have the time in country to develop deep experience, and because of that, officers were constantly forced to step in and assume NCO duties. Talk about a complete reversal of von Steuben's vision, right? This crisis proved, absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the Army needed a permanent fix. It directly spurred the creation of the comprehensive NCOES and the Enlisted Personnel Management System, which finally tied a soldier's promotion directly to their professional education.
And that brings us to our final era, Chapter 6, the modern NCO Corps, lifelong learning and leadership.
Today's NCO is no longer just some localized trainer. They are lifelong, globally deployed professionals. And if you want physical, concrete proof that the enlisted NCO is a deeply educated professional leader in their own right, just look at Fort Bliss, Texas. That sprawling campus is the United States Army Sergeants Major Academy, which opened its doors in 1987. It stands out as a massive testament to the Army's commitment to treating NCO education with the exact same rigor and institutional respect as officer education.
Building on that, the modern NCO professional military education learning continuum has evolved into what we now call the NCOPDS. It's this holistic lifelong learning strategy. From the basic leader course all the way up to the nominative leader course, it's a carefully designed progressive path. It's built specifically for a complex, decentralized world, where leaders basically have to continuously adapt just to keep up.
So, why does all this intense education matter so much today? Well, just look at the environment we operate in. During the global war on terrorism, the Army saw over 18 years of continuous combat. In that kind of environment, decentralized, small unit operations become absolutely paramount. Today's NCOs are out there executing incredibly complex civil and military affairs tasks, things that, historically, used to belong exclusively to commissioned officers. Add to that, they carry the immense, round-the-clock burden of upholding Army values and discipline in a 24/7 digital age. Make no mistake, they bear far more tactical and ethical responsibility today than literally at any other time in history.
Which really leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. We've seen how the NCO adapted from the freezing musket lines of Valley Forge to the isolated radio outposts of WWI, right into the complex counterinsurgencies of the modern era.
But as warfare increasingly shifts into cyberspace and multi-domain operations, how will that timeless NCO mission of training and caring for troops adapt to the unseen battlefields of tomorrow? Well, one thing is for sure based on this history. The backbone of the Army will always find a way to evolve, lead, and win. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope you found this historical journey as fascinating as I did.